Greetings, everybody. I'm Salvador Cordova. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel, where we explore evidences for the Christian faith in creation science, intelligent design, and archaeology, Christian testimony. We also argue reasons from what we would call presuppositional apologetics, which is a little bit of philosophy, and then also we deal with some biblical difficulties. This YouTube channel is home to YouTube's #1 YouTube creationist, and so a lot of what's covered here is creation science. I'd estimate creation science and intelligent design. I'd estimate 65% of the content will be creationism, creation science, intelligent design. However, because of events at my local church, and also because I'm a leader in the apologetics ministry there is a kind of a nationally known event right now, a vote coming up on July 18th. For those of you who follow Christian news, this is being followed. The events at my local church, MCLEAN Bible, which is a big mega church. It's being followed because it could be a critical vote this coming Sunday. And I'm calling this coming Sunday, July 18th, D-Day. Hopefully, after D-Day, we'll be resuming our regularly unscheduled programming. In fact, today I found out that I'll be doing a lecture on creationism and thermodynamics on the 24th. I hope to also resume going back to doing dull, boring chemistry lectures that help us with the Christian faith, and then things related to how to teach, how to instill faith in people through their secular studies, especially homeschoolers, using what they're learning in history and science and etc. to help them grow closer to the Lord. A lot of times in our the way Christianity is taught is like you have your secular life, like say you're a chemist or whatever, and then you have your sacred life, what you do on Sunday. I found that one way to instill faith is to look at our involvement in the secular world and see how it points to Christ. That ennobles even everything we do to help us to do all things for the glory of God. And just sometimes turning a different perspective on our secular studies can make it a very sacred work, a very sacred activity. And I think that's important because then the Christian life feels real. It doesn't seem like you're doing one thing on all the other days of the week, or when you're not praying or in church. You'll always be exposed to the things of the Lord wherever you are. And that's my hope. That's the goal for this channel. So today, let me see what's on the docket. And this is going to be a challenging topic. I'm not here to try to meddle in anyone's personal life. It's none of my business. However, when someone is up for nomination and confirmation as an elder of a church, their personal life, unfortunately, becomes church business. This is not about trying to redo the Salem witch trials, or like in the Pilgrims' days. I was a little bit horrified that the story of the Scarlet Letter actually originated from practices in Puritan New England, and was even conducted by the Pilgrims, where someone has to have embroidery on their clothing to indicate their past sins, and just broadcasting it to the rest of the world. I don't know. I mean, there's nothing in the Bible that says to do that, to wear your sins for all to know. I mean, and that's not what I'm here to do. I don't like, I don't want anyone to come up to me just out of the blue. Wouldn't want a stranger to come up to me out of the blue and just open up a laundry list of everything I've done wrong. To do that to anyone seems just so unchristian and cruel. And I was confronted with a comparable decision this past Sunday in the church lobby. And I'll show you a picture of the church lobby. Let me see if I can bring it up. If you will just permit me to get all my buttonology, all my switchology set up. And yes, that is an aviator term, switchology. So let me see if I could show it here. And that is the lobby of MCLEAN Bible Church. Now, it's empty now, but it's empty now. But the point is that's where all this was taking place. And I was agonizing whether to walk up to one of the elder-nominees, one of the nominees up for confirmation this coming Sunday on D-Day, whether he's going to be the pilot of the airplane, so to speak. And I said, I need to confirm or refute allegations that I think are very serious that I've heard about him. And something deep inside said, Sal, this is so wrong. You don't, a repentant sinner, if he's restored, if he's a repentant sinner, you treat him as if, I mean, you forgive people and you just look beyond it. You do everything you can to restore him. And his wife was standing right there beside him. I said, Sal, this is in my heart. I was agonizing. I said, Sal, this is so wrong. Jesus said to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I said, yeah, this is exactly what I would not want ever done to me, that someone I don't know is just going to wander up to me like a rude reporter and just ask me a question out of the blue. I mean, that is just like so wrong. That is so wrong. Yet on the other hand, and I said, God, I don't know what to do. I mean, my gut said this is so unchristian to do this. You just don't do stuff like that. And when I went home later that day, I remembered the passage in Ezekiel. It said about being a good watchman. If you don't alert the people and you know something, their blood's on you. But if you alert them, you're absolved. And I said, God, okay, I'm willing to try to do what little I can to resolve this situation. And I was saying, Lord, this is not my fault. If this man, Ken Tucker is his name, he's an elder-nominee, and I'm going to go into more details about this. If he's guilty of this, at the very least, given that there was a pool of elders ahead of him that probably had clean records, certainly stellar records, whom the church disinvited, this wouldn't even be taking place. It would have been a moot point. Other people would have been nominated to this office. And instead, they did not serve him well, if this is the case, by letting it get this far. Because once it gets this far, his personal business now is church business. If he were just a regular congregant, it's no one's business. It's generally no one's business. Generally no one's business. I mean, we want repentant sinners to feel welcome in the church. This is the Christian message. And even though I have a great regard for the founding fathers and the church culture surrounding it, even the Puritan cultures. I think sometimes they went a little overboard in not extending appropriate charity to repentant sinners. So this show is not about trying to trash someone's reputation. And anyway, the allegations haven't been even confirmed. The way it will be confirmed is if Ken Tucker himself comes forward and said, yes, this is common knowledge. I did this. I don't broadcast it. I'm in the process of healing with my wife. But I showed you let me show you the picture of the church lobby. And if you can maybe imagine what was going on here. So this is the church lobby, and I was somewhere right around here, right around that location. It's amazing we have pictures of that. And there were some of the ladies from church through the various ministries that I've worked with. It come up to me, and we were just talking about the upcoming church election and the vote. And I pointed out Ken Tucker. He was standing just a few yards away from us in that lobby. And the women were just rolling their eyes and whispering, "Was that the adulterer?" And I'm like, oh my goodness. Is this... I heard the allegations coming across from credible witnesses ever since June 30th. And Ken Tucker's wife has been part of MCLEAN Bible for years, and she's been participating in the women's group. It would not go unnoticed that her husband might have abandoned her for years, might have abandoned her and their children for years. I mean, this is really kind of hard to hide. So if that's true, I'm just like, well, this has become more than just gossip. And it's like, Sal, we're not to gossip. And I said, this, what due process should be, in which did not happen on June 30th, is that it says in the Bible, this should be brought before the congregation. This should be brought before the congregation. What happened on June 30th was no one was able to bring their concerns to the congregation. I'll tell you what happened on June 30th, and I behaved myself, even though I was tempted to cry out and say, this is a charade of a meeting. But let me show a picture of what was happening. First off, it's perfectly okay, and I'm grateful there are policemen with guns at our church events. Now that may shock some people, and let me tell you all a little bit about church history. It used to be, and I know this is going to sound really funny, it used to be if you were part of the militia and you failed to bring your gun to church, you were fined, because you were hired to protect the members of the congregation from whatever sort of attacks. Given that at a local congregation here, an elder was nearly assassinated, Jared Bridges of the Family Research Council, when Floyd Lee Corkins, who's known as the Chick-fil-A assassin, made an attempt on his life. Thankfully, he was stopped. So there are all sorts of nut jobs out there that for any reason might try to go into the church. Sometimes there's domestic problems, and that husband just wants to get after his wife, and he might do it right there in the congregation. That happened, sadly, at a recent mass shooting in a church in Texas. So I want to be fair here. Despite some of the reports of using armed security as intimidation, I would say those reports are not accurate. They're not accurate. It's more subtle than that. What had happened, and this is still significant, was that when the meeting began, the first responder team, of which Sandy Pigeon has been a part, came and made an announcement and said, any church assembly cannot be disrupted. It is a violation of Virginia law and subject to arrest, prosecution, or something like that. That if anyone speaks out of line when not invited to speak, so when someone shouts in the middle of the meeting and disrupts it, church security can escort them out, and if it's a real problem, the Fairfax County Police, which you see the officers there, are authorized to grab them and take care of them. So what happened was they're using kind of Virginia law to kind of, and then kind of the way that they conducted the meeting to bludgeon, so to speak, figuratively speaking, to bludgeon church members into being quiet. Rather than giving them the opportunity to raise their concerns in public, in the congregational meeting, as it teaches in the Bible, they shut the meeting down. They made sure no one had a chance to say anything except the pre-scripted plan of trying to present these elder nominees. Even in a wedding, it has been traditional in some weddings. The minister will say, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." For something so solemn, they will allow an opportunity for someone to speak. I found that amazing, and I think it'd be interesting, kind of church history, how that came to be. I'm just totally speculating that it was because out of conscience, people are saying, okay, we're going to give someone a chance to come forward in this sacred assembly. We were not given that opportunity. And hence, this is failure of due process, because now rumor mills are just going around and it's hard to determine what's true. Now, I would not come forward today if I didn't feel the allegations were serious enough. And I'll tell you one bit of thing that moved me forward to make this case tonight. What had happened was, when I was in that church lobby, and this is also a close-up of the church lobby, when I was in that church lobby, as I said, I didn't confront Ken Tucker. I found out later, about a day later, someone else did in that church lobby, and asked him up front, is this true? He's someone that I trust. Ken Tucker said yes. Now, I don't know all the details about the exact timeline. If this happened 40 years ago, before he was a Christian, I'd have a lot less problem with that. I'd And I think the Bible, I'd be curious to find out what the body of Christ feels about that. If, someone had, and this was a long time, and there's been a history of just excellent service to the church and being a husband and father for something that happened a long time ago. But if this happened after he was a Christian and it happened recently, the issue is not whether he should be expelled from the church or disciplined. If he's repentant and he's reconciled, we would want care and support for him, his wife, his family, and the healing process. But because he's he's not just becoming a passenger of the airplane. He's applying to be a pilot. It's a different matter. Okay. I'm deliberately putting that analogy. It's different being the pilot of the airplane than the passenger. He's welcome to be a passenger all the time. Repentant sinners are always welcome to be members of the church. But to become pilot of that airplane, you got to pass your examinations and what we call check rides. And just since I introduced the term check ride, since I'm willing to introduce the term, I'm going to use the term check ride. When I was applying to get my pilot's license, I remember the day when the FAA authorized examiner came by, and she was a famous jet pilot, the first woman pilot to land a jet on an aircraft carrier. Her name was Velta Bin, and this was sometime around 2002, 2001. I think 2001. It's on my flight log somewhere. She signed it. And when I met her there at the airport, she looked me over. She said, "Oh, are you my next victim?" My next victim. And yes. All this to say, you do not serve people well if you don't, when it comes to doing something where you're going to be the pilot in command, so to speak, on some flights, it doesn't serve you well. It doesn't serve the community well if you don't hold that person to high standards. So, yeah, we went up and flew, and yeah, she was giving me a lot of challenges. Hang on. My connection is frozen. Let me see if I can undo this. Hang on, guys. I restarted the camera. I mean, she's going to she tested me on how I'm going to handle stress. So she simulated an engine cutting off, and she said, "Now you're going to show me how you do an emergency landing, the right way to set it up." And yeah, okay. That was one of the funner parts of the exam, and she was testing me if I could recover the airplane from stall conditions, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's neither here nor there. I'm just trying to add a little levity to this serious situation. But Ken Tucker is now applying to be pilot of the ship, so to speak, or one of the pilots. It's a different ballgame. His personal life is kind of part of the examination process and the questioning process. And, right now, and Emery has pointed this out here, okay, prior to salvation, I'd let it drop. If it was recent, he does not meet biblical qualifications. If these alleged events are recent, he does not meet biblical qualifications of an elder, a man of good report. I'd also say if he had abandoned his wife and children, he doesn't manage his household well. That's not good. He has to be self-controlled. All right. If he ran off for some years, that's okay. That's not good. A lot of the women, and again, the allegations are not confirmed, but they were visibly upset. They would expect more in kids. That resonated with them. And I didn't want to come forward. As I said, I wouldn't want anyone to do that to me when I'm trying to recover from my sins and I'm repenting of it. But this is an issue about being a passenger on the airplane. He's welcome in the church. He's welcome as a brother, repentant sinner in the church. But this is about being pilot of the airplane. It's a different story, not about trying to shame anyone. We all have many things to regret in our life, myself included, and I wouldn't want a laundry list of my sins paraded around. Um, I don't want the job of a pastor or an elder. I want to teach chemistry. I want to teach molecular biology. Okay, my personal life doesn't have to be on display, all the sins of my past, etc., etc. And so, where was I headed with this? Yeah, if I hadn't said it already, a trusted colleague went up to him and said, "Ken, is this true?" Now, I couldn't, I told the guy, I said, "You're a man of steel." I couldn't do it. I mean, it just, like I said, it just seems so rude. I didn't have, I was conflicted about doing this. I said, sometimes you just go on intuition. I had a chance to think about it, and I said, no, if I had to do it over, I'd probably go up. But it's really tough to go up, and there his wife is standing beside him, and you're going to ask him and just confront him up front in front of his wife. Well, someone did that. He told me that Ken confessed. And so I'm just like, okay, is this like when Monica Lewinsky had DNA evidence of her affair with the president of the United States, and when it was confirmed it was Bill Clinton's DNA, that it became kind of ridiculous, that it became futile to deny. And so is this story so obvious to small groups in the community that Ken Tucker's not even denying it? And so with that, I'm coming forward and saying, what's happening on D-Day is not right. Before this goes forward, these concerns and other concerns need to be aired in a congregational meeting where you don't recruit security to do your dirty business. You use the security to protect the congregation members. That's why they're there. They're not there to do the dirty dealings of the leadership, where they're practically demanding rubber stamps, and they're deplatforming voices of respected people, and from the pulpit insinuating that these people are divisive and spreading disinformation. You want me to show you what divisive looks like? And now I'm getting a little bit animated here. I'm going to show you what divisiveness looks like. Want to see what divisiveness looks like? This is my pastor. This is one of my pastors. I'm going to show you a video of my pastor, Mike Kelsey. You want to see what divisive speech sounds like? I'm gonna show you divisive speech. Let me see if I could bring it up now. All right, let me do a screen share here. I'll show you what divisive, just if you will indulge me a little bit while I get my buttonology all set up, my switchology. I'll show you what divisive speech is. Here you go.
Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians. Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians.
So, I mean, compared to anything I've said, let the congregation decide what's more divisive. You know, it says in Corinthians, the church was letting people get up there and just berate them, and they tolerated it. 2 Corinthians 11:19 through 20. I mean, a large part of the congregation is just tolerating this right now, but a large part of the congregation has left. We heard here testimony from Dr. Sandy Pigeon, who was a member of MCLEAN Bible Church. When Mike Kelsey gave his infamous talk in May 2020, and he was insinuating that the whites in the congregation were not making other races feel welcome. Looking at this video, it seems ironic he's doing exactly what he's accusing other people of. He's making people feel unwelcome because of their race. I mean, okay, so if you remember all the torching of buildings and property, I mean, and I've showed pictures of Mike Kelsey having little kids hold up BLM signs, Black Lives Matter to God, but it's like, okay, you're going to put the Lord's name and associate it with this evil movement. Then have little kids hold up these BLM signs, and it's associated with torching of property, looting and plundering and destroying and vandalizing property, destroying black people's livelihoods, even murdering black people. And then he says this. So, you know, if Dave Platt wants to criticize people for divisiveness, he could point the finger at his own deputy pastor, whom he promoted for his advocacy of racial justice. So let me play this again.
Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians. Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians.
All right, so that's one of my pastors. That's one of my pastors at MCLEAN Bible. I was tempted to leave, but it was not God's will. My mother was alive, and I was caring for her 24/7. I had no opportunity to even look for another church. And then after she passed away, and I went through for a couple months, just like in a daze, in a grieving process, and someone contacted me from church and said, we have a chance. There may be some small provision in the church constitution where we can get rid of the current leadership. And I said, there's been so much carnage to the church at this point. I don't know that they could be financially viable. We'll have to be liquidating the $150 million complex at Tyson's Corner. But you know what? The church isn't about property. If we liquidate that property, the church goes on. This is about electing leaders. I know Mark Gottlieb was very concerned about this, but the church is more than the tangible assets it holds. It's the people. And it's about having good leaders who can pilot the airplane, so to speak, and who've passed that check ride in the FAA examination. I'm sorry to be using these flying metaphors. You could see how much. Okay, I was an engineer in the aerospace and defense industry. It's just kind of hard for me to run away from certain language. And so this, where I was headed with that is they're trying to shut down dialogue. They're trying to say we're divisive. We're spreading misinformation. I've given you Mike Kelsey in his own words. I could show you, you want me to show you pictures of him with the Black Lives to God? Why don't I do that? These Black Lives to God pictures. Yeah. I'll show you these pictures. And I know I showed it yesterday, but I'll show it again. So this is a picture of torching, and we just heard Mike Kelsey himself saying how sometimes it's difficult for him not to torture all white people, especially white evangelicals and Christians. Goodness. And there's a little boy with a Black Lives Matter to God sign that Mike Kelsey, there he is. Pastor, the Reverend Mike Kelsey, is helping little kids, teaching him what he believes is the way of Jesus. This was advertised on the MCLEAN website, where the little kids are holding Black Lives Matter to God. And that Mike was using this as an event to preach the gospel and extend invitations to people to receive Jesus. Does he not realize this makes white people feel unwelcome in his life? He's doing the very thing he's accusing other people of doing. And so going back on the topic, and I'm going to go off topic a little bit, going back on the topic of the church shutting down discussion, they are kind of misusing the armed security by using Virginia law and then their privileges as leaders of the meeting to prevent discussion. They're going to say, you're not going to scream here. We're going to have you arrested. Now I will, and it's okay for them to say there's going to be order in the meeting. What I'm complaining about is the temptation to scream in the meeting is there because they are not doing their duty to allow people to bring their concerns before the congregation. That's the failure of due process here. And D-Day is fast approaching, and they've still deplatformed us, shut down discussion as mandated by the Bible. The Bible didn't say, you cover up misdeeds by deplatforming people and marginalizing them. The way, I'll tell you who are some of those people that they are accusing. Some of them are former elders like Mark Gottlieb. And I had a whole story on Mark Gottlieb a couple nights ago. There were a family of 5 founding families. There were 5 founding families, that began MCLEAN Bible Church 50 years ago. A mere 5 families. So what would the numbers be? 20, 30 people? I had the privilege of meeting some of the members of that family, including one lady who's now much older, obviously, who was there at the very first meeting of the church. So maybe just imagine a meeting at 30, and she was saying, yeah, she was tasked with trying to get all the to line up all the chairs in the meeting room, and to add some more chairs to make it look like the church was a little bigger. It's kind of funny. And she is one of the no votes. So here comes David Platt and saying, you're being divisive. She's one of the people that had been there for 50 years. She doesn't like what's going on. I don't know that she's seen that video of Mike Kelsey. In fact, I'm surprised it hasn't emerged sooner. And when thankfully, and you know who you are if you're watching, someone provided me access to these videos and pictures of Mike Kelsey with the BLM signs. I think this lady would be pretty upset, even more than she is now already, and to be told that she's the one being divisive and spreading disinformation. She's one of the 5 founding families of the church when it was about, say, I'm guessing here, about 30 people large. And now it had reached the zenith of like almost 20,000 people over 50 years. And then under Dave Platt and Mike Kelsey's watch, within a year, we could have lost maybe half the congregation. No one really knows what the numbers are because there's not transparency. We may have lost 11,000. Now, the funny thing is, they try to erase it from what I hear. And again, this is not confirmed reports, that they can erase voting. They're trying to erase one set of books of members that are voting. But then because the SBC tries to brag about the numbers that they have have another set of books that say, okay, they can't vote, but they're just inactive because we don't want to admit that we've lost 11,000 people in 1 year. You know, that upset the SBC. But I would hope, if the SBC, corrupt as some of the leadership, Ed Litton, if you're listening, if there's someone there of any conscience, why don't you phone all your SBC operatives in our church and tell them, hey, you guys are messing up. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing about that. It's so bad that it's almost, you know, sometimes things are so bad you can't help but laugh because it's just so bad. So that's mostly what I had to say. In my heart of hearts, I hope it's not as bad as it sounds about Ken Tucker. But D-Day's fast approaching. So there are 2 things. First off, if these allegations are true, they need to be brought before the congregation as elder nominees. I'll tell you what, the question should arise: does Dave Platt, does Wade Burnett, does the elder board know about this? If they know about this and they still put them up for nomination, that's serious. This is bad. It's like, what kind of airplane are you? You know, what kind of ship are you running here? If they knew that, what are you guys doing? There are so many more qualified people that this leadership has dismissed. And for the MCLEAN Bible people, it would be people like Rob Thompson, Jim Battle, Ken Usted, someone named, I think, Mike Zulu. And forgive me, I missed one of the names. One of them is a former elder. One of them, Rob Thompson, friend of mine for 17 years or so. Professor of Physics, Commander Rob Thompson, retired. Professor of Physics at Annapolis. He would be going to work and then coming here to McLean, which is a long drive for him, and teaching 3 classes, volunteer, unpaid. Stellar credentials. He brought up before the elder board, not the elder board, he brought it up to David Platt and presumably Mike Kelsey, that the congregation perceives Mike Kelsey as an activist first and a pastor second. I'm told that he was invited to leave the church. So he was among that pool of people that were going to be selected to become elder nominees. Instead, we have this issue with Ken Tucker. So the question is, what's going on with the leadership? Why are they, well, that's a rhetorical question, really. Why is Dave Platt selecting Ken Tucker over someone like Rob Thompson or Jim Battle? Jim Battle was the one who composed the doctrinal statement from the church. If I'm getting the names wrong, it's one of what we call the five nominees that were uninvited. He wrote the doctrinal statement for the church, and he was the one that was confronting Dave Platt and say, you're not following the doctrinal statements standards of the church. The guy who wrote it. And Dave Platt said, well, you can leave. In fact, this past Sunday, he was inviting members to leave. Some people were really offended by that. Like, okay, if you're a member of the founding family of McLean Bible and this new guy comes along and say you're welcome to leave. They're people that have been serving the church as volunteers for 30 years. Volunteers. And some pastor that we invited, that we paid, now says you can leave. People were incensed. Of course, I mean, it took 50 years to build the congregation up to 20,000 or so, and you lose it in 1 year. Yeah, that's the sort of behavior that can do that, okay? I mean, Dave Platt invited people to leave, and they did. So, I don't know how I got on that tangent. Yeah, I was saying it should have never gotten this far. It should never have gotten this far. We have an elder nominee, and due process has not settled the allegations. And I was showing you pictures of the McLean lobby, and women, when Ken Tucker was mingling in the lobby, and I pointed him out to the ladies that were around me, they were just saying, oh, that's the adulterer. I'm like, this is not a good situation. Do you want an elder? Okay, so yeah, now I remember I had a Joe Biden moment. I lost my train of thought. Now I remember what I was saying. If the allegations are true, they should have never put him up for nomination. Now that he's up for nomination, with these allegations of running off with a mistress and going down to the Bahamas for a few years, abandoning his wife and kids, and this all happening recently, I'm going to recommend, as a matter of transparency, they amend his bio, the promotional. I know this sounds terrible, but the promotional materials that are written by people trying to facilitate this process on behalf of David Platt and the SBC. Yes, and Emery. Yes. So I'm going to show you here. This is Ken Tucker. And I'm going to highlight something here. Okay, so it says here he's married 40 years. And that's his lovely wife. As I said, I really, this past Sunday, I couldn't bring myself up to confront him in front of his wife about these allegations. Even though I had good reason to believe they were true, at that time, I just couldn't bring myself to it. It took some reflection on my part to say, yeah, this isn't about personal business. Because he's running for elder, this is now church business. I would never do this to anyone unless they were applying. So anyway, so married for 40 years. And what else? Let's see. Here it is. He says, I'm a marriage assessor for New City Network Planters Assessment. Okay, so I presume this means that when they're planting churches for the SBC, he's involved. He's assessing whether, I'm presuming, and this is, I don't have the facts, but I'm just guessing here, that he would assess whether the leaders of the new church are in good marriages. Okay. Yeah, that guy who said white people is torch white. Yeah, he's my pastor. That's Pastor Mike Kelsey. He's one of my pastors. And and Emery and others have confronted me and said, why are you still at that church? As I said, my mom was still alive. Elder Mark Gottlieb, who interviewed me, said, when your mom passes, you have to come back. Almost, not, 2 months from the day that she passed, I got the call and said, Sal, we need your help. And I was so close to resigning my membership. Someone stopped me. And I tell you, it just felt like God is saying, Elder Mark Gottlieb was telling you this is what you need to do. When your mom passes, you're going to go back to McLean and you're going to fight for God's church. Whether we succeed or not is, as far as me personally, that's not the ultimate. I have a responsibility to at least try. I'm a watchman. And Ezekiel warned his people and they still ignored him. He's off the hook. That's the position I'm in. And it is a coincidence, or maybe not, that my mother is named Esther. It says in the book of Esther, it may be that you've been appointed for such a time as this. Now, I've heard my last video with Mike Kelsey talking about torching of white people and white Christians and white evangelicals. Torching Christians and evangelicals. How's that for having a pastor? That video is starting to go modestly viral. I had a private copy that was circulating, and then on YouTube I have something like 240 views, which isn't much. But we now have, that's the one thing I can offer. And that's the verse that kept coming to mind is, maybe you've been appointed for a time such as this. And the timing, so you ask, why am I still here? It was a strange set of circumstances that I'm still with the church and voting, because I would have left in 2020, but I had nowhere else to go. I was in strict isolation for 15 months, taking care of my mother 24/7 because of the coronavirus lockdown. Otherwise, I would have been gone. But I had nowhere else to go. And I said, well, I have too many other things to be taken care of. I'll be a good servant of God by taking care of my mother. And that was my focus to my dying mother. But I remember when I was interviewed 2 years ago, Mark Gottlieb said, when your mother passes, you're coming back to McLean. And here I am, I'm back. Yeah, exactly. So Graham here says, and welcome. I would run from a church that said discriminate against white people. Why would David Platt have a person like that in a teaching position? I don't get it. To me, that has the spirit of pure hatred. I'm hoping Mike Kelsey misspoke and just said stupid stuff. I say stupid stuff a lot, and maybe he was just exaggerating. But the optics of this, the superficial look, doesn't look good. You see the guy hanging around Black Lives Matter, kind of, to me, being corrupted by bad ideas. He's buying the Black Lives Matter narrative about racism being the cause. I mean, that's what it seems to me, the cause for African Americans having a huge, like, say, prosperity gap. And if I remember, I'm going to cover that. Let me try to complete my train of thought. So we have one situation where Ken Tucker, if these allegations are true, and I said I've given good reasons why, several people have come and said them. One person yesterday told me that he confronted Ken Tucker, and Ken Tucker said, yes, this is true. And as I said, just like with the Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton thing, where when the DNA evidence was there, it was futile for Bill Clinton to contest the allegations. Because Ken Tucker's wife has been part of McLean, if he had abandoned her for like a few years and the children, it'd be hard for people not to notice. I mean, you can imagine her going to a women's group function and they're going to ask, well, how's your husband and kids? All right. So this is really hard to hide. So it's probably, I'm just like, okay, there is something called church discipline where we would record. Oh, I need to point that out. This is, and I think the Puritans took this a little bit too much to the extreme, but in evangelical circles, in the Christian culture, if someone is unrepentant and persisting in sins, you excommunicate them, and they have to go through a process of repentance to be restored to the congregation. So while they're in the sin, if he's out there in the Bahamas with his mistress, you can excommunicate him. McLean Bible Church has excommunicated or deposed staff. I'll give you the names. Denny Henderson, in, like, say, the 2003, 2004 timeframe, was deposed. He was caught lying. After a month of process, they removed him from leadership, removed him from the church. He was a pastor. That's an example of church discipline. They will not tolerate a teaching pastor or elder who's lying. And this is public knowledge, okay? It was just provident that I happened to be at a meeting, I think at a church service, at the end of the church service in 2009, or sometime that time frame. The pastor at the end of the worship service said, can everyone leave? This is, who's not, we want this before Christians. But anyway, I'll just go ahead and tell this story. He said, we have some church business here. We found that Stephanie Cuomo and another staff member were caught in an affair. She was married to someone, and she was having an affair with someone else. She had to be deposed from the church staff, and I believe that was an official excommunication. All right, that just means, I don't know how that is completely practiced, but usually someone is so ashamed after that, they're not going to enter the sanctuary to worship. They're certainly not allowed to have communion. What's very sad is Stephanie's voice was just like an angel, and it was beautiful to have communion with her singing. those are some beautiful memories. I felt so close to the Lord whenever she would sing. So it broke my heart to hear that she succumbed and was excommunicated. Was Kent Tucker excommunicated? If there are records of this, then this is well known. And if he wasn't, why wasn't? I can suggest one reason, maybe not so nefarious. McLean is an enormous church, enormously sized church. Unless it is a staff member, active staff member or pastor, they probably just don't have. The bureaucracy would be too big to conduct that. There are numerous problems with running a megachurch. That's one of the problems. That's why when we have a congregational meeting, if you have 400 people there who are wanting to speak, it's going to be very prohibitive to be able to conduct business where you bring people before the congregation and say, hey, this guy has issues. And that might have been kind of the sorry excuse for some of these sham congregational meetings. It's like, well, we don't have time to examine the elders and hear about allegations of adultery. So McLean has done that. But, this may be in the church records. Are we going to, this is an investigation that needs to happen before D-Day. So what I'm saying is maybe we need to postpone D-Day so we could actually do things according to what our Lord and Savior commanded. Give this process a chance. This is failure of due process. We're rushing to do this, and I'll tell you why we're rushing to do this, at least the way it looks to me, is someone has an agenda to push through leadership that'll rubber stamp whatever is invading the church. This woke theology, and of which it seems to me my pastor, Mike Kelsey, is a part of. And you heard him speak in his own words. It says, out of the abundance of the heart are the words of the mouth. I hope he misspoke. But he was saying sometimes it's really hard for him not to torch all white people, especially white evangelicals and Christians. Is he just exaggerating for effect, or is that out of the abundance of his heart? If it is, he needs to be benched. It's understandable why people would leave the church. This has gotten out of control. And we have a $150 million complex. Someone's salivating at a chance to liquidate the assets. I'm going to tell you something that it's in the church constitution. The entities that we support that come out of our mission budget, if the church is liquidated, they get a proportional amount. I don't know how, these SBC entities could be these mission, part of the pie, pieces of the pie of the annual mission budget. Okay, so we don't know. Right now it might be in a few $100,000. But if we liquidate McLean and say they're 10%, 10% of $150 million is $15 million. Someone's going to profit a lot if we do a full-out liquidation at this stage. If the no votes prevail and we have to liquidate, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove all these entities that shouldn't be getting mission money. And if liquidation happens, then $10-15 million won't be going to corrupt entities. Yeah, that's the money trail, okay? There's some people that could articulate this better than I did, but that's a situation. Someone can profit from McLean failing. Someone can profit tens of millions of dollars from McLean failing. So if McLean fails to deliver the gospel and the woke, quote unquote, gospel succeeds, that's one way to influence things. If McLean fails financially and assets are liquidated, tens of millions of dollars could go into wrong hands. That's my understanding. If I hope I'm wrong. Oh Lord, please Lord, I hope I'm wrong. I'm articulating the reasons I'm getting involved in this. I don't get paid for this like Dave Platt or Mike Kelsey. It'd be easier for me to just bail out and say, hey, I don't want to be part of the management of the grocery store. I'm just a customer here. And I'm a disgruntled customer. I won't come back. But when I signed up to be a member, it makes me part of the management. Mark Gottlieb said, when your mother dies, you have to come back to McLean. I think that was prophetic. And that's why I'm making these videos. Dave Platt from the pulpit said, what is not biblical is people getting on the internet and spreading disinformation online. That's not biblical. I'm like, okay. Is it biblical then, Dave Platt, if I just merely if I merely play your deputy's own words? That's not disinformation. I'm not slandering him. I'm letting him speak for himself. When he said he'd having a difficult time not torching all white people, especially white evangelicals and Christians. White evangelicals and Christians. He's having a difficult time not torching them. I'm hoping he was just exaggerating and just, misspeaking, be overly dramatic. I hope that's the case. I really do. Because if he really feels that way, that's bad. But he fails for not bridling his tongue. That is not speech that is above reproach, especially with him holding Black Lives Matter signs, Black Lives Matter to God, and encouraging little kids to do that. No, this just, the optics of this just don't look good. So finally, if in what I feel is the remote chance the allegations are false, let due process clear Kent Tucker's name. Let him speak before the congregation and defend himself from his accusers. We owe that to him, because it's not good that I'm there in the lobby and women are, and I point him out to them and they start saying, oh, that's the adulterer. That's not good either, okay? He has at least, I want to give him the opportunity, but that's to clear his name. And if he's not given that, that's not being biblical. And so these charades of congregational meetings where it's not conducted properly in accordance with the Bible's teaching, where one side only gets to tell its story. It says in Proverbs 18:17, one side makes its case until the other comes and examines him. The congregation has not had the chance to hear the other side. We've been longtime members, founding members of the church have been deplatformed. David Platt and the leadership there own the microphone. They have marginalized and dehumanized from the pulpit people that have been a part of building this congregation, unpaid volunteers. And that's what's going on. Before I say goodbye, let me cover something about Mike Kelsey. He has a lot of rage. And this is, I said I was going to go off topic. This is mostly off topic. But I need to try to point something out. He's saying, we need racial justice. We need racial justice. And I wanted to say, Mike Kelsey, you said we should be politically involved. You said this from the pulpit and the infamous May 2020 sermons. We need to be politically involved to end racial injustice. And I rhetorically said, okay, does that mean we should end affirmative action that discriminates against Asians applying to school because they may exceed kind of the imposed quotas? Is he gonna approve that? Is he gonna that's a clear example of systemic racism. And I told some of the reasons why there is that disproportion. If you're in an Asian household, okay, I have 5 degrees. I came from a family that wasn't even that academic, okay? They're academic for maybe the average age Asian, but there's some Asian families that really pounce on you. They didn't pounce on me. In fact, one day when I came home and I showed my report card to my mother, I said, I got straight A's. And she said, yeah, I expected you to. That was about it. I was really kind of upset. I thought she was just going to be so happy for me. She just kind of shrugged it off. She said, yeah. I later told her, I said, Mom, I was pretty upset. You didn't seem to be happy. She said, oh, I thought that'd be pretty easy for you. I totally expected it. And I was really upset. But I'll never forget a few years around that time, I met a family. The mother was Chinese, and she was almost scolding her daughter, saying, "You're going to get straight A's." She was like saying, like she's not going to accept anything less out of her daughter. Now looking back, that means she expected her daughter to be valedictorian. And some of these Asian families, that's normal. I mean, that's not out of the ordinary that an Asian family would be expecting their kids to be valedictorians. I wasn't valedictorian. I started to goof off a lot during my junior year. Okay, so I did not become valedictorian, but there's something else, here that I need to show. And is Mike Kelsey going to be willing to have a conversation about these statistics that I'm about to show you? Prosperity and success of families is deeply tied. Prosperity and success of individuals is deeply tied to their family upbringing environment. Single parent households affect the success of the children. If you're not, there have been studies on this, and Thomas Sowell has talked about this. If there are single family homes, there is a strong tendency toward poverty. So let me show you these statistics. And this is why I distrust Mike Kelsey. It's like, where are you getting all your rage from? Yes, there's racism in the United States. I've had black people scream racial slurs at me, okay? It's not fun. But what really does cause the income inequality among demographic groups? Let me show some statistics. And I know the font is a little small here. Children in single parent families by race in the United States. American Indians, single parent families, 2019, 52% rate. Asian and Pacific Islanders, 15% rate. Black or African Americans, 64% rate. Asians have the lowest rate of any demographic group. They're overrepresented in the universities for a reason. Not only is it the culture to impose high academic standards, for whatever reason, husband and wife stick together. I remember one time I was saying, Dad, you're a little family business here. There was some tension in the household, and I said, Dad, why don't you just let Mom leave? She's so unhappy. Or why don't you leave? And I remember I was just crying before him. I said, I'm not happy with what's going on in our family. And he said, Sal, I made a vow for better or worse. He said, he took his vow it was a very sacred vow. And that resonated with me. I said, okay, so even if your marriage union results in your children being unhappy, it's for better or worse. I get that. And that was the end of it. I mean, this may surprise some people, and maybe it's worth it to say, Mom and I didn't get along, and I would have been really happy for her to leave, because she has my temperament, really emotional. And God bless her. I had the chance after Dad died. God gave me the chance to reconcile with my mother. I grew to love her immensely, as you could see. I took care of her for 18 years after Dad passed. I was the primary caregiver 24/7 for the last 7. And I'm grateful God gave me the chance to heal that relationship. I would read the Bible to her. I would share with her. It was an honor for me, the son, to teach her about God's word. Yeah, it was a lonely trip because just before Dad died, I was thinking about getting married, and it just didn't work out. And I said, God, you have a reason for this. Shortly thereafter, Dad died. God put me where I really was meant to be. But the point is, that high rate of marriages and the family holding together has economic consequences. How does this relate to Mike Kelsey? Has anyone sat him down and said, hey, look at this? This is maybe a major cause for the inequalities in society. You can't keep scapegoating the sins of the past of people that are long dead, that were slave owners, for the cause of family breakdown. Just because racial slurs were being directed at me and my family members is not an excuse for our family to be broken apart. Have to stop scapegoating racism for all the problems in these demographic groups. That's what's wrong. And that's what I have issues with. He's going to get up on that stage and then blame racism for all the ills, or many of the ills, of what's going on for certain demographic groups. And then he's in a full rage, so much so that he wants to torch all white people, that he's having to just restrain himself to torch all white people, especially white evangelicals and Christians. And that's my pastor. And it's like, dude, you need to be benched, simmer down, and learn some truth. This is misdirected rage. You're drinking out of the Kool-Aid, or worse, it's the worst scenario. And God forbid that this is true. He knows it's a lie, and he's going to preach it anyway. I don't think the general consensus among the congregation is the guy's just misguided. Even Sandy Pigeon said that. He had some bad SBC pastors just kind of egging him on to be more woke. And I just wanted to say, Mike, this isn't cool, bro. You're blaming people for things that they are not guilty of. You're not diagnosing the problem correctly. Giving people the gospel, giving them the standards, telling them the responsibilities of being a parent, a husband, father, a mother, and a wife, helping people to hold fast their vows. It says in Psalms, the one who's able to stand before the Lord on his mountain is one who'll swear to his own hurt. So when it says, for better or worse, God may allow people to end up in a situation by contract where it's for the worse for their pain. But both in the Psalms and then in the New Testament churches, the early Christian churches, keeping your word counted for a lot. It's not like today. When you make a sacred oath, you try to keep it. It's not just for ceremony's sake. You try to keep it. You try to keep your word. And so when husband and wife say better for worse, it's expected they'll follow through it. It could be pretty painful. But I've shown you the demographic results there. The families, the demographic groups that have lowest incidence of, I'll show it again here. The demographic groups that have the lowest incidence of single parent homes. This translates into the highest prosperity. Do you know the one demographic group that has the highest average salary? It's Asian males. Okay, I'm an Asian male. All right, sorry to brag. But it just makes sense. If the family holds together, they instill hard work in the children, you in general have better results. This whole thing about, white people calling you names and using racial slurs as being the cause of the family breakdown, and therefore the gap in demographic groups, I don't think that's well justified. At the very least, I think it's false, for one, but at the very least, it's not proven. And Mike Kelsey is swallowing the story, the narrative, hook, line, and sinker. And it's showing in his rage toward white people. He said, all white people. And white evangelicals and white Christians. It's showing up in his rage. It's misplaced rage. That's not indicative of someone that's thinking clearly. And he got egging on at SBC seminaries, liberal SBC seminaries that have gone woke, off the rails woke. Something happened this Sunday. David Platt said, I gave sermons against abortion. I gave sermons, about sexuality. He said, if and God bless David Platt for saying this. He said, if you are, the Bible has standards about sexuality. If you're not obeying them, you're willfully disobeying God's law. You're on your way to hell. I've said, I'm not going to mess in people's personal business unless they're running for things like elder. They can run for political office. They could probably succeed doing that. Since we know politicians are not held to high standards these days. But I'm trying not to have a Joe Biden moment here. Having a Joe Biden moment, I just lost my train of thought. Man, if you don't follow through with your train of thought in about 20 seconds, you can lose it. And I've totally lost it because I was distracted looking at the chat here, and I can't multitask very well. So, I was talking about Mike Kelsey's rage and his lack of clear thinking. And he's just getting on there Sunday morning, yeah, and he has all this rage against all white people and white evangelicals and Christians. I mean, you're hearing that from my pastor saying, yeah, if you're a Christian but you happen to be white, well, if you happen to be white, he has a hard time not wanting to torch you. And if you're, but he said particularly if you're white and you are an evangelical Christian, an evangelical or a Christian, particularly he said that. So he's so enraged that we're not joining his crusade to bring racial justice, which I'm presuming he means that we have more income equality or comparability. I wanted to say single parent homes have a way of generating kids that are maladjusted, higher probability going to jail, higher probability of substance abuse, which goes to jail, and homelessness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's thinking this is all because of the racism in the United States, and there's plenty. I told you, I've experienced it. My sister could not. This was way back in like the 70s. It just a few months before she and her white husband got married, Virginia repealed the law against mixed race marriages. So I've seen it, okay? It didn't stop them from prospering in the United States. My other sister married an African American. So there's someone white who married one sister, someone black who married the other sister. It's not like, I'd like to think we're not a racist family. That's evidence of it. But we've been the subject to racism, but we can't use that as an excuse if the family broke apart due to divorce and I had to be raised by a single parent. I mean, does Mike Kelsey want to stop affirmative action? I've tried to explain the demographic reasons and the cultural reasons why there is huge disparities, both in terms of people going to jail and economic disparities. We did not have at MCLEAN Bible Church an opportunity to engage in these more rational discussions about the underlying causes. If it reflected in his heart that the real cause of this is racism, that it's maybe whites, all white people, as he said, all white people, that's not appropriate for a leader of our church. And then now we have this whole thing with Ken Tucker. Goodness. Allegations of adultery. And I would not have come forward unless someone told me yesterday that he confronted Ken Tucker in the lobby and asked him were the allegations true. I've heard word that Ken Tucker confirmed that they were true. My friend said to him, I think you're not qualified to be elder. You should withdraw. And I'm going to emphasize again, I don't want anyone to come to me, a stranger, and give me a laundry list of all my sins. It would, that would be, I would not want to do that to anyone. If you're a repentant sinner, you're welcome in the church. You're welcome in the church. That's a glorious thing. That's what the church is organized. But as I said, Ken Tucker is not trying to be a passenger. He's trying to be the pilot of this airplane. And the Bible is saying you're not qualified to be a pilot. That's a recipe for crashing and burning. Not just yourself, but the congregation. And that's what this is about. I'm concerned, and that's why I'm coming forward. Secondly, it shouldn't have even come to this point. There's a point of due process where he could have been challenged And this wouldn't be in the rumor mill where the ladies in the lobby are just, kind of, murmuring among themselves when they see him walking through. That's not a good situation. And if these allegations are true and McLean leadership knew it, they have failed him and they have failed the congregation by not abiding by the principles the Bible laid out for the qualifications of an elder: being above reproach, self-controlled, able to manage his household. Abandoning your wife and kids for an extended period of time, going broke. You're not managing your household. We don't want someone like that. You don't want someone like that managing your finances, okay? He will have decision power over a $150 million complex and quite a few $1,000,000 a year in church ties. This is, this is bad. So, an announcement. Sal, I'm going to bet you'll be off the rolls on Sunday's vote. Yes, I might be excommunicated because I had this tirade. They want to have a church trial, and I get to face my accusers before the congregation. Bring it on. But I'll make an announcement. Some of you have seen the documentary, The First Baptist Church in Naples. The First Baptist Church of Naples. The enemies within the church and how there was a takeover. I've been told there's going to be a new documentary. I wonder if they're going to offer to interview me as one of the excommunicated members of McLean Bible. Yes, I could be off the rolls to vote on Sunday. I'm expendable. Yes, we lose one vote. I had to make a decision. This is going to be, they're going to have to give an account for why they would remove me off the rolls. Sandy Pigeon and some of the more legally well-minded people were distributing copies of affidavits. For the first vote, it was really funny. We were out there in some parking lot, and he was you could see like he was a SEAL commander there in our little band of brothers here and sisters. He was just like kind of rallying the troops before we were going to make a parachute jump. He was saying, yeah, it felt like, I was feeling the same anxiety I had before we do parachute jumps. And, I don't mean to be irreverent here, but when he was rallying the troops and said, you can sign these affidavits if you're removed. You sign these affidavits. That's very important. That you were removed. You believe you've been removed from the rolls improperly. You sign these affidavits. We're going to collect them. This vote, there are numerous things that could, maneuvers that could happen after, but we're hoping it's going to be a moot point. So David Platt says, I'm trying to sow divisiveness. I'm trying to sow unity. I want a unified no vote on Sunday. How's that for unity? We're going to take the Word of God seriously and say this is not the way the Bible teaches to run church business. Let us all be unified to do it right. I'm for unity. I'm not trying to split the church. I'm trying to unify it and get them to have a no vote on Sunday. Praise God if that would happen. That would send a message. That'd send a big message throughout all Christendom. Maybe I'm being optimistic here, but may it happen. Yes, gentleman's bet, Emery, whether I'm off the rolls. I'll report. I'll give a D-Day debriefing, and we'll see what happens after that. After that, I want to go back to teaching, having my nerd sessions on biochemistry and zinc finger proteins and endogenous retroviruses. I know that just seems so foreign. All right, we got a gentleman's bet. You're on. So before I say good night, I'd like to thank all the listeners who've heard this. I'd like to especially thank any of those of McLean Bible that have heard me out, that are supporters or on the fence or even on the no side. You're my brothers and sisters. I felt a responsibility, because we've been improperly deplatformed, to bring this to the larger congregation of Christendom through cyberspace. Now, David Platt said it's unbiblical to spread disinformation. What have I said here that is untrue? It is true that there are allegations. It is not yet confirmed that the allegations are true. But it is true that it has not gone through due process. It is true that Mike Kelsey talked about torching all white people, especially white evangelicals and Christians. That is true. You saw it. It is true that he's encouraging little kids to have these Black Lives Matter for God signs, associating these little kids with a movement that does torch cities and properties. It is true for many other things that I'm not going to cover, since I'm going to try to shut this down. And so before I say goodnight, I'm going to scroll through some of the side chats just to acknowledge my friends, especially those that are that I haven't seen. So there's someone here named Don Zimmerman. I think you're new. Greetings. Mike Kelsey has written publicly that he had a relative who was raped by a white slaveholder. You may want to consider walking a little more carefully here. All right. Okay, Don, thank you for coming to my channel. It's public knowledge my aunt was raped by a white man. Look up Connie Reyes in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm just saying. I'll give you another one. My mom was in World War II. The Japanese soldiers came, took her neighbor, their neighbor's son, and beheaded him. Gave his body parts back to the parents. On his birthday. Would that excuse me saying I hate all Japanese people? Absolutely not. You know what happens at McLean? There's an intercultural outreach that I'm a part of. Filipinos and Japanese eat and dine together and love one another. So you want me to walk carefully? I'm just trying to give you an example. I don't see how we can have so much hatred for the sins of other people that are probably long dead, and you're going to try to torch their children. Or maybe they're not even the descendants of this guy. And you're telling me to walk a little more carefully. In McLean Bible Church, people that basically the generation after the prior generation were, my relatives were shooting Japanese, and their relatives, the Japanese at McLean Bible, their relatives were shooting at Filipinos. We are gathered there in peace. If we can love one another and not blame each other for all the ills of the world, Mike Kelsey can start to love all white people, and particularly white Christians, white evangelicals, and white Christians. It's unbecoming of a pastor to harbor such hatred for sins of the fathers. It says in the Bible, you do not punish You do not punish children for the sins of the fathers. This rage is misplaced. It's inappropriate to have a largely white congregation paying his salary and then him having that attitude that's misplaced rage. I'm sorry. I have to just, well, anyway, welcome to the channel. By the way, if you're a sister in the congregation, I respect you. If you have a vote, you will have a vote. You will have a vote. Specifically, this vote is not directly about Mike Kelsey. It is about the leadership in general. If the no votes prevail, there'll be an opportunity for a no confidence vote, and the entire leadership could be removed. But the particular issue is these three elders. So the no vote, I've given you what I think is credible evidence regarding Ken Tucker. I feel that it shouldn't have come to this, where it has to be discussed publicly in this forum because of the lack of due process that didn't happen at the congregational meeting. But if you feel the allegations are strong enough and that there have been other improprieties done, then may the Lord guide you in your vote. I can't tell you how to vote. That's between you and the Lord. I've told you what I'm going to vote. So I want to thank you for joining this discussion. And yes, I'm very sorry that Mike Kelsey's relative was raped by a white slaveholder. My family suffered immensely when my aunt, actually technically my mother's cousin, in the Filipino tradition would call her an aunt. I've been contacted by the Oxygen Network. They're doing a special on, they'd have a lot of crime specials. They're giving family members an opportunity to memorialize their lost loved ones, and I may have the chance to memorialize a victim of rape and murder. She was raped and murdered. So I can understand how Mike Kelsey would be upset about this. So thank you for visiting here. And we have Mr. Jetty. Thank you. All the way in Europe. And we have Cheryl. We have In His Image. Emery, otherwise known as Emery Moina, our resident graduate student in biology, who, God willing, will graduate at the top of his class. Cheryl, great to see you. And if I miss someone, yes, and yes, Dawn, I'm I didn't mean to be too confrontational. I apologize for that. I mean, since my family has gone through that too, this was that's just a bad situation for all of us. And thank you for praying for God's best. Patrick Alexander, great to see you as always. He would say, yes, I miss the old sink fingers days. Laugh out loud. Yeah, that was kind of punishing, wasn't it? 4.5 hour monologue on molecular biology. And yes, I know our friend from Eastern Europe has to go off to work. Thank you for joining us. Dapper Dino says here, my relatives were also shooting Japanese. My grandfather spent years behind Japanese lines, disrupting their supply lines. I still have Japanese friends and watch tokusatsu. Oh, speaking of which, oh my goodness, Dapper Dino is here. I'm scheduled to do a talk on bad creationist arguments from the second law of thermodynamics. Yeah, maybe after D-Day is over, we're gonna go back to this. We're gonna go back to our regular unscheduled programming in creation science and nerd topics. Yeah. What did you just walk into here, Dapper? Okay, I'll show you what my Okay, so if you're Dapper, are you still here? Two of my friends were murdered by Hispanic people. Don't feel angry at Hispanic people in general. Okay, so you want to know what you walked into here? Okay, I had clips of my pastor here that I was sharing because there's among kind of in the Christian community, the major flashpoint right now is my local congregation, MCLEAN Bible Church. Not my local, the church I'm a member of. They're a mega church. They manage like $100 to $200 million of property. A lot is at stake here. And so I'm going to show, I'm going to show what my pastor had to say. And let's see.
To be honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians. Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians. Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians.
Okay, so Dapper, you don't know what you walked into. I don't want to get in people's personal lives, but one thing is a pastor. Oh, did that not volume? Okay, let's try this again. Did it come through, Emery? Let's see. Try it again. Let me get my switchology correct. We'll try this. This is the voice of my pastor at my church.
Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians. Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians.
Sorry, hopefully the volume is better. Just a strange set of circumstances. I almost left, but as many of you know, I was taking care of my dying mother. And so I really didn't have a church to go to because I was in lockdown for 15 months straight. Yeah, I'm having all sorts of problems with my switchology. That's an aviator term. I think I got it all straight now. I was, I couldn't look for another church. And then after she passed, I got these calls to be participating as a voting member, which makes me part of the management And so I don't know what's going to happen after D-Day, which is going to be this Sunday. Is this a big vote? But we're talking a lot of money here in position. President Trump, Mike Pence came to this church, other dignitaries, military leaders, business leaders, internet moguls. So this was kind of the crown jewel of the Southern Baptist Convention. But with statements like what Mike Kelsey was making, we've had an exodus in the church. We are at the peak of 20,000, maybe 11,000 left in just 1 year. It took 50 years to build it. So, yeah, that's what you walked into, Dapper Dino. And so let me take this opportunity to also thank you for talking about the early church fathers. I've referenced that talk a lot on this channel favorably. And I wanted to thank you for donating 2 hours of your time on a Friday night to do that. And yeah, 20,000 people congregations just creates a lot of problems, and it creates the situation we're now in, where the bureaucracy has grown. A congregational vote now has law firms tallying the ballots. We have armed security in the congregational meetings. Yeah, there's Fairfax County Police with their guns in their holsters walking around during the meeting. Yeah, it's a different ballgame when everything, the congregation gets large and there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. So, oh yeah, so you're talking about early Christian history. Yes. And so maybe after D-Day is over this coming Sunday, I'll get back to doing my usual nerd shows. So this has been High Drama. I'm really glad to see you here. And I think I've gotten through the list. And Don Zimmerman, thank you very much for your prayers. It is nice to see you. I saw some other names, Ray Giordano, Earl Rowe's here. And I saw Earl Rowe, and Andrew Graham is here. I think I've mentioned your name. Yes, 15. If church assets are liquidated in the current state, the corrupt North American Mission Board could inherit. Just my guess here. They could take a $15 million piece of the pie. Just guessing here. And there were some other people that joined us. Yes, there are a number of reasons there's this fight brewing. Whenever power and influence are at stake, you can bet there's going to be a big fight. So with that, I'd like to again thank everyone that has joined us for the show. It's been a blessing to be with you all. To all the viewers, to those who might find this talk through Capstone, to my fellow members at McLean Bible, and maybe to even some of the leadership at McLean that might be watching this show. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Take care, and God bless you. Have a good night.